We are streaming.
And you gotta go.
I know.
Yeah. I like that garnet thing.
Is that a sake bottle?
Yeah.
Now that we don't drink sake
Now we
anymore,
drink alcohol,
it's been
we just like
reappropriated.
Last
Love.
time I had a hangover, sake was involved.
The last bad hangover I had when I
I've
was
only ever
still
had
consuming
two.
alcohol was gin. I haven't drunk gin since. Then I wised up. The last,
Okay, so it says that we're streaming and recording on the one thing, but after I refreshed, I still didn't get a live window. Oh, here we are. We're live now.
We're live now.
And now we're really live.
And now you can type in the chat and tell everybody hello. You can do the Beverly Hillbillies wave. And
Oh, the queen.
oh, that's the queen. And then there's the beauty queen in the parade.
That's the princess wave.
Oh, that's she was doing something.
Oh,
This is Billy.
well, wow. I'm
See?
impressed.
That's what happens when we start on time. She shows up earlier, not wait for her. So we're live. Hello, everyone. Do we have anybody online yet?
No.
Because we're all here.
You're all here.
Yeah.
It's interesting though.
Two of
We're
us.
getting a lot of views. We're getting 15 to 20 views
It could be people going back
each
to
week.
review,
Yeah, could be.
because
Getting
I've
other
done
people.
that with a couple of them,
So
and I had a pin.
welcome. There's live bodies at the other end of those chat streams, and they're right here today.
Did I
Should
not
use a-
just have a pin in my hand?
That means you're going to have to stand up and look inside the sofa that eats bodies.
The sofa that eats.
We have found blankets and jackets and all manner of things in there after being missing for a year. Probably went down that crack there, that one, someplace.
Excuse me.
That's okay.
Turn it up.
You can inspect the sofa.
Let's see it.
Well, let us know if you find Yvonne's cell phone.
I've got another one though.
Yeah.
I'm good. I always have another
Corey
one.
Vaughn's cell phone.
I'm a writer. I always have pen and paper.
Yeah. Okay, so last week,
Just so you know, we're having technical difficulties
what
here.
kind of technical?
Well, it's not showing live. I got a live window at one point. Hi, Yvonne.
Okay, check the other one and see if we accidentally.
Hang on, I'm in the middle of doing some stuff.
Hello.
Hello. All right. Now, just so you know, we're getting smoke because of that.
Oh, that's not what I asked.
Hi.
But that's okay.
It's sucked your butt in.
There's some. I brought some extra pillows out so you don't get sucked into the couch. Okay, we'll be here shortly for those of you who online waiting for us to figure out what the heck we're doing. How you doing?
Okay, just got back from running. Worked up right.
All right,
Clear.
think I'm good.
You think you're good?
I think I'm good.
There's a window and me waving.
Clear than here
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was one of those things
Guess
where
what? My phone just fell up.
you're kidding.
It did what?
Oh my god!
You've been lugging it around in your journal for a week, losing it.
Accusing us of stealing it, nonetheless.
Now you see what that tells me.
I looked through this!
Uh-huh.
I
What that
did.
tells me is you haven't been writing in your journal enough.
Now you got Pogo going.
You outed yourself.
Well, you know, it's been a week, right?
Exactly a week ago today.
So you've been in a time warp for an entire week.
Okay, can you switch cameras to look at the audience for a moment?
So we can all look at Yvonne.
No, I want
Quite a
to
shade.
show. I want to show the sofa.
The sofa. Okay.
This sofa where Cherie is sitting there on the end with the pink bottle is where Yvonne sat last week. And she accused me of having my
I
sofa
did
small. I had to turn this sofa upside down twice looking for that thing.
Oh, there's the other pin. I got a second one out and I can't find it.
Okay, so just so you know, if Sarah has anything worth talking about, she's going to need to move over towards Cherie just a little bit.
Okay.
Because all we're seeing is her lap, basically.
I don't have anything to talk about. Oh, come on.
Oh, I know better than that.
So apparently, Arlen and I missed the turquoise shirt memo.
That's one way of looking at it. And as the leader of this motley crew, I could say those three missed the black shirt memo.
Where's your black hat to go with your black
It's
shirt?
right up there. Grab it for me.
Okay, well, here's a different pin. Okay.
I
See if
told
you
him
can go
that
3 for 3.
he took a picture of Mina sitting in his chair, and I said he needed to put the black hat up on top of the chair and take a picture of her with the hat there, and then take a picture of him with his black hat in the same position.
Oh my
It's
god.
not
There.
too bad. We don't have shadows, so.
Okay.
Well, that last one was a gel pen. That was a pretty nice one, too.
I'm
All right.
sure it's nowhere. Check your journal. Are we back on me?
We're back on you.
Let me look in my journal. Maybe it's in there.
See, it doesn't matter what time we go live. We never get started.
This is the Toltec path to Venus.
Cherie
How
said
many of
it's
you-
her fault.
I know the answer for you, but how many of you have read all my blogs in the Roots of Shamanism series?
Here and there.
Here and there. How many of you read the Rocket Science blog?
I do.
I think I knew about it.
Okay.
I think we're in trouble.
We're all outing ourselves.
That's okay.
It's
No,
been
it's
a
my
long-
job to do that. It's
it's
like
been
my
a long
job to tell
summer.
Yvonne, your phone is not in my sofa. You've got it. Which I've been doing for a week. And now it's my job to tell you, you haven't been writing in your journal enough. Because if you had, you couldn't have written on those pages on one side or the other without finding that phone.
It's too late to trade them in.
So you're the one, right, who put it there. So the reason I'm asking that is I've kind of slowed down blogging this month because I know you guys weren't keeping up. I was doing maybe 2 a week, thereabouts, which isn't much.
I was still anti-laptop.
Well, you guys
I have this
in
thing
Reading
with it,
have an excuse. You spent most
And
of
we
the
were
last
there
week
for a
running
lot of
away.
them. Yeah.
And I understand that, and so now it's time my duty to remind you to catch up.
Yes.
The people who don't live in Reading.
I moved to Reading, yes.
I didn't know that.
I'm in Cherie's bathroom where all the art supplies are.
Ah.
So that job is done. We'll move on. The Rocket Science blog contains a secret magic formula
No, this-
for spiritual work. When you read the blog, you will find it. It's not hidden. I think I even put it in bigger type. And I know it has a lot of capital letters in it. And anybody watching, I'm going to say the same thing, which is I'm not going to tell you what that formula is. I'm going to make you go read the blog.
It's a secret formula for what?
Your spiritual work. The work with capital T and capital W.
Nobody says do it.
No.
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 Okay.
Some of what you need,
Do we need air?
Yes.
yeah, we do. We need that fan on. It's not plugged in.
Let me do
I'll do
it.
it. No, you. Normally I wouldn't do this. I'd make you do it, but there's no way through there. Yeah, that's why I had to take the phone or the hat off because.
Like our
Three
Three
losing
Stooges.
pens.
I know. It's like, okay, the real show starts in about 3 minutes when Yvonne gets here. Few false starts.
These are all the writing utensils I think I may have, aside from the ones that have disappeared into this couch.
Okay.
He'll turn it upside down, don't worry.
And this one
What
was,
is it about that end of the couch? You notice how the people at this end of the couch never have those problems? The people sitting out in the chairs never have those problems?
there's the other's pencil sharpener, of course.
It's a night for finding things. I'm glad you came tonight. All of you.
I am too.
If I didn't come tonight, I'd still be looking for them.
I know, really. See?
So do I want pink
See how
or green
wonderful
wood?
Bonnie...
Before you leave,
Huh?
there's 2 things. One, I need to show you that nutritional product that I
Okay.
didn't show you today.
Okay.
And then 2, turn your phone on loud.
So we can vibrate it when you lose it.
So when you lose it next time, you can have someone call it and then find it.
I found my purple pen.
In the world,
To the rule of turning sound on your
well, I said before she leaves. Do that.
Yeah. I'll put it in the other room.
do it later.
So, rocket science is one of the highest level scientific fields of engineering and physics. I won't claim it's the absolutely positively highest in terms of difficulty, but if it's not the absolute most difficult field, it's at least second. And I don't know what would be first.
Brain surgery.
Engineering and physics, yeah, it's all whatever. Maybe, okay, so it's up there, right? But it's certainly the highest in terms of altitude. Right? So we fly spaceships to other planets. We put people in them, fly them to the moon. We put stuff all over the solar system, right? So it's not trivial. And to do it successfully, this is kind of a few key highlights in that blog that I really appreciate you all going home tonight and reading. To be successful in that field requires to do your job well. And if you don't, the laws of physics, when you're pushing the envelope like that, are very unforgiving. It doesn't take much of an error to make things blow up. And anything blowing up is a bad thing. When people are in it, it's even worse. That was a bad day. So, I learned some things during my almost couple decades as a rocket scientist that I realized later have helped me on my spiritual path tremendously. And so this blog is a way of sharing that information. If you're watching this on live or Memorex, tape delay, go read the blog. Toltec Shamanic Arts, click on Golden Eagle Discourses, click on blog. You'll find the rocket science blog. All those blogs are important. Part of my teachings for you are in those blogs. You can start at the beginning, you can jump around. The only ones that I truly recommend you read in order are the ones marked The Roots of Shamanism. They're numbered 1 through 9. But read the rocket science one first. There's some message in there that you need. Last week we finished up. Oh, no. Thank you. I want to talk about our meditation for just a few minutes. We've been doing what I call the Upgrade Your Consciousness meditation, where we're upgrading each of us individually our consciousness, and we're upgrading the human collective consciousness. We've been working on the weather, and then we added in, so that was to refresh your memory, it's you get in your meditative state, you hold the world between your hands, you send a kadwa, you observe the glowing pink field around you, which is the consciousness field. You're talking to it. You're sending a message. Where we started was healthy, normal, optimal weather everywhere now. And then after a couple of weeks we added God lives, love is the answer. We've been doing this at either 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. Both would be great, but do whichever one you can. I'd say no more than half the time do I get both done, just because my schedule is busy just like yours. And that's been going well. Anybody online?
There's somebody who hasn't logged in.
Okay. Maria usually logs in, so it's probably not her.
I don't know.
Oh, she said she was starting a new job. I don't know what her hours are. Yeah. We're at a point now where this has been going on, and it's time to morph it again. 7 a.m., 7 p.m., that the same. Hold the world, send a message to the consciousness field. That's the same. There's two things, I guess you could say three, that we're adding. One is the message is don't worry about the weather. That one's no longer required. If you would like to continue that, you may. Doesn't hurt. Can only help. God lives. Love is the answer. We are all one. Is the message. Now, we're adding two new things, and you can do either or both. This was interesting, and I'm not done researching this, but the Dalai Lama has been quoted as saying that Mount Shasta, this mountain right down the way there, is one of the 7 sacred sites on the planet. So I thought, ooh, yeah, we're going to use that. And we're going to connect to the other 7 with an Akadua grid. And we're going to also radiate this message through all 7 sacred sites. So I thought, how interesting would it be to look up the list of what the Dalai Lama said, and I can't find it. I find all sorts of allusions to Dalai Lama, 7 sacred sites, it's a video, buy it, it's this, it's that.
It might not have been him.
Well, I've read it.
No, he doesn't.
If it wasn't him, it was somebody impersonating him, or at least pretending to have quoted him.
People project, oh yeah, I heard it, and
Maybe.
yeah.
But I've read it over the years that we've lived here. I've read it at least 8, 10, 12 times in different places, in books, on websites.
It's up on Facebook.
So, but I couldn't find any place that there was one list that said the Dalai Lama's 7 sacred sites. I thought it would be easy. I spent a half hour looking, and there's all kinds of places that say, here's the 7 sacred sites that are the chakras of the world.
And none of them agree.
And none of them, yes, ding, ding, ding.
There's that.
None of them agree.
We're the heart center. No, we're the root,
Root
chakra.
center. No, we're the crown center. And, yeah. So what happened was I said, enough of that. I'm going to tap in, and I did my own shamanic meditation today.
Oh,
And I'm like, here's the 7 sacred sites.
okay, wait a second.
So, I
According-
am not assigning any chakra correspondences to any of them. Mount Shasta. One. M-O-U-N. Lake Titicaca.
How do you spell that?
Titicaca. That sits on the border between Peru and Bolivia in the Andes Mountains. Very high up. What is it, 13,000 feet?
It's pretty high.
Lake Titicaca, something like that. I remember I first heard about Lake Titicaca when I was a kid watching a Jacques Cousteau show. And he hauled his gear up there
Mm-hmm.
and they went diving in Lake Titicaca.
I remember that show.
Yeah. No, that show caused me to become a scuba diver.
Oh, wow.
When I lived in Florida, I became a certified scuba diver. Had several advanced certifications. I went diving every chance I could get because it was either that or sit on your porch and get eaten by bugs.
Were you diving last night?
Was I diving when?
Last night or in the last 3 days?
Scuba diving? No. No.
Because that's been in my dreams.
After there's some other meanings to that. We can talk about that later. After I moved to California, I dove a little while, but out here, instead of being warm, the water is cold. Instead of being clear, the water is murky. And this murky, cold water is full of big, big, big fish that want to eat you.
Oh, wow.
Great White Haven. So I quit diving, mainly because of the cold and the visibility. I really wasn't that worried about sharks. But it's always in the back of your mind when every other month you hear of another surfer getting attacked. Of course, when you're on the surface riding a paddleboard with these flipper things going, from below you look just like a seal. So they really are asking for it. So Lake Titicaca, Glastonbury, on the same island as Scotland, but in a country a little bit to the south.
You mean the entire whole of Glastonbury or the Chalice Well specifically?
They're not that
Tor?
specific.
Okay.
It could be the Tor, it could be the region of
So
Glastonbury.
we'll just put Glastonbury.
Then we jump over to the Middle East, and I think it's the Sinai Peninsula. It could be the Great Pyramids were built on the spot. The spot may have shifted slightly, but there's several references that talk about that whole region.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was number 4. Then we go to the Himalayas. Mount, oh man, there's a specific mount starts with a K
Annapurna? No.
in Tibet.
Yes. Annapurna.
No.
K9. There's K
No.
something.
Where did I put that? Oh, is it over here? No.
What was after Glastonbury?
I just wrote down Himalayas. There's a mountain in Tibet and it starts with a K. I think it's like Kailas or something like that.
Kailash.
Kailash.
K-A-I-L-A-S-H.
Okay.
There's a pass called Kailash.
I think the spelling I saw left the H off, but that's the mountain.
And it could be K-H-A-I-L. I mean, there's options for transcribing languages that don't use the same alphabet.
Yeah. After the Himalayas, we jump down to Australia to a place, the English name is called Ayers Rock. I couldn't pronounce
Uluru.
the Aboriginal name.
Uluru.
Yeah, something.
Uluru.
How do you
Uluru.
spell that?
U-L-U-R. Ulu. U. Yeah. U-L-U-R-U.
And then the last place is in the Big Island of Hawaii.
Which one? Or the whole bunch?
I
They're sitting on
can't
top
remember if
of
it
a
said
big
Kilauea or Mauna Kea.
Mauna Kea, Mauna
Mauna Kea is the tallest one, right? The one that gets 13,000.
I think so.
Mauna Loa is the 12,000. I think it's the bigger one.
Okay.
Mauna
So
Kea.
Mount Fuji isn't in there?
Oh, how many am I up to?
You're
1,
at
2, 3,
7.
4, 5, 6.
No, Mount
This
Fuji
one.
was in there. What did I get wrong?
I didn't hear Fuji go by. What
Ayers
was
Rock,
the one
Mount Fuji. Oh, no. Yeah.
After Glastonbury was what?
Mount Fuji
I didn't write fast.
and Hawaii but we're both on several lists, but it was Mount Fuji when I did my meditation. Sorry. Scratch that Hawaii thing. Sorry, Hawaii.
Okay, so
Important, but not the top 7. I know Nina's not going to be pleased.
Nina calls Mount Fuji number 1.
Yeah.
Does she?
Yes.
Well, I didn't rank these.
Well, the mountain told her it was 1, and it has a relationship. It told Nina with Mount Shasta, they're both in
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah, they're sister mountains. That's why we get busloads, literally busloads of tourists from Japan here to buy crystals in Mount Shasta.
and make
Right.
drums and make rattles and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Or hiking,
John's quite busy with the Japanese
take
people.
pictures.
Oh yeah, I know. I've known John for years.
Yeah.
We have a Chinese artist who's part of the art walk in Mount Shasta. Her husband runs her.
We have the taiko drummers here, which are
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, almost as good as Kodo.
Mhm.
I saw Kodo at college.
So the way this meditation is going to work is we're obviously physically located closer to Mount Shasta.
I don't know how to spell that.
So do the meditation in Shasta, S-H-A.
No, not that. The
Okay.
Kailak Peninsula. Didn't know how to spell it.
Oh, Kailash.
That's a mountain.
No, in the Middle East.
Sinai,
Oh,
Yeah,
the Sinai
Sinai.
Peninsula. That's the one I was looking for. I didn't write this.
S-I-N-A-I is how we spell it in English.
Okay, thank you.
If you want the Hebrew spelling, I can't give that to you
Thank you.
Shinyog.
because they don't even have vowels. They're such a poor country, they don't even have vowels.
That's why English is 26 letters instead of 22.
Both kitties again.
But they're an important country, geographically.
Linguistically and culturally.
So when you're going to do this meditation, I'd say, do 5 minutes with holding the world, with the God lives, love is the answer, we are one. And then switch over to sending energy to Mount Shasta, requesting the mountain forward this to all the other sacred sites. And if we end up doing Hawaii and Mount Fuji and we have 8 sacred sites, I don't care.
Right.
Oh, there's more than so.
But when you look at the geographic distribution, I think Hawaii is important.
Lemuria.
It's what used to be. Of course, the California coast qualifies too. The redwoods, right there.
Santa Cruz area?
Oh, no. Different geographic strata.
It's mostly the Redwood Coast. But really, all of our volcanoes in the Cascades are Lemuria regurgitated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
And Lassen is the farthest south of the Cascade volcanoes.
Yeah, that is the farthest. That's where I consider the Cascade Mountains ending.
And that gap is actually where the Sierra give way to the Cascades. It's just right there. And Big Game is in the middle.
So send
Oleone between two lingams.
Send the message to Mount Shasta with the Akadua. Ask it be forwarded to all the other 7 locations and ask them all to radiate. So we're working in the etheric and the astral, and now we're adding the physical. But through the higher frequency higher level radiations. Does that make sense?
Quite an internet.
Yeah. Only it's more powerful than the internet. There's one more option that you can play with. And that is very shamanic. And it's using the trees. Trees everywhere on the earth create their own antenna consciousness system.
Forest is a system.
And they have asked that we talk to them and work together. Some trees are very ancient. Has everyone here been over to the Redwood Coast?
I haven't been through the groves over there. I've been to the coast, but Richard wouldn't stop. I've been to the ones down by Yosemite. I've been in Yosemite.
Yeah.
That's not the
Is
coast
that
redwoods.
one of the reasons why that individual is an X?
One, because it's so typical, not just one trip. It's just typical.
The redwoods are ancient. And part of it isn't just those trees, because those trees are maybe 1,000 years old, the big ones. It's the land. That is a piece of Lemuria. That is one of the most ancient pieces of strata on the earth. I just saw an article, I reposted it in What We Know this last week. I don't remember which day. Where they claim to have found a piece of North America, geologically speaking, in, what was it, Australia or Indonesia? Someplace way over on the other side of the Pacific.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it matches exactly what we've got here. And I reposted it real quickly, and I just said something like, a piece of evidence in support that there had been a Lemurian continent. Because it's when you go through the layers and you line them up, well, it doesn't match this stuff that it's around, but it matches North America,
So
which I found highly interesting.
So by matching North America, you mean North American Craton or this piece of North America?
This is when they drill down, they look at the layers, how thick each layer is,
Right.
what each layer is composed of. It doesn't match Asia,
Right,
but it matches like the west coast of North America.
the West Coast, okay.
And I may not be explaining it 100%
That's okay.
accurately because I'm not a geologist. I'm like that person, Bonnie found a meme on this week that says, somebody told me to have these rocks showing a handful of crystals and they'll protect me. I haven't had to throw one at anybody, but I really like the idea.
Yeah, that was funny.
I liked it. I clicked like.
Yeah, and I heard recently too, they just discovered a pyramid, I think. It was either a pyramid or a temple. I'm pretty sure it's a pyramid that's older than any of the other pyramids that's buried. It was buried in the dirt, and it has the flower of life on it.
Cool. Where's this at?
Where?
In Egypt.
Oh, yeah, I read something about that. Well, physics is physics.
Well, there's more
Right.
pyramids too.
The flower of life, we're a little off track, but the flower of life is based on the same physics that produces the tree of life. And
You can actually find the tree of life in the flower of life.
Yes, you
That's
can.
What I'm
Mhm.
looking at.
so all of that is based on the physics of the structure of the universe, is where I'm going with that. So different people, different times, different places will come up with the same answers if they're using a rigorous scientific process. So go talk to the trees Pick your favorite tree.
Yep.
Send the energy. And just like we were telling the mountain, talk to the buddies and have them radiate the same message. We talk to the tree, talk to its buddies everywhere on the earth, and have them start radiating this message. So now we've got the message in our meditation, holding the world in our hands. We've got talking through the mountains. We've got talking to the trees.
Aborigine tradition, trees are the messengers of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And certain indigenous North Americans, trees are the standing people, and boulders and rocks are the sitting people.
Oh, cool. I hadn't heard the sitting people. So, any questions on these meditations?
What happens energetically if you're on the mountain and do this?
Nothing. You'll survive.
No, what I mean is it more powerful message for Mount Shasta to send?
No.
Okay.
You don't have to be up
Might
there.
be better for you.
If you want an excuse to go to Mount Shasta and meditate, yeah, you need to go to the mountain and meditate and do this.
I can.
There, you've got license to go do that.
I live in Reading now, and I can feel the mountain more accurately and consistently than I can find true north. And I've always been able to find north without.
Well, keep in mind that the mountain is a big enough magnetic point
She's huge,
that it
yeah.
throws off, the other coordinates.
Does it?
Oh
I
yeah,
could
big
always tell
time.
where north was when I was up here,
And
and I.
So a compass would throw off?
I think it does, but at least as far as your instincts and like when we had our clinic downtown, we had a big window that faced the mountain, and so the energy was kind of coming through that front mountain, and of course it's still in alignment with the east and so forth, but you could feel that pull, where you're trying to maybe connect with the four directions. It'll pull you off because we're so close to it.
Let me say this in response to your question. I'm just kind of agreeing with Bonnie in that I've been using compasses since I was too young to be in Cub Scouts. My dad taught me. And I know how to use a compass. I've been using compasses for 50 years. And
The field's fading.
when I get up here, I have noticed that compasses behave oddly. It seems like we have more magnetic variation than we're supposed to here. And I think the mountain is doing it. So something's there doing that. I've observed that from different places on it. It's like, well, it just doesn't work right. I can go out here in our driveway, and our property is aligned due north and south. And a clear night, which we haven't had any of lately, I can line up the North Star, and our property is lined up due north and south. And I can whip out my compass, and it goes.
Yeah, it does that at my property too.
What's that?
It does that at my house too.
Yeah.
Think also about the sub-frequencies of the Akadua, and if you're at the ocean, the oceanic is going to throw off the balance a little bit, just because you have that huge
pull.
influence there.
Yeah.
I think the mountains do it. I think huge bodies of water do it, and potentially even crystals and minerals under the ground are going to do it. And that may be why so many of the sacred sites are near mines and different things.
I was with a shaman that was older than the culture. I forgot what it's called, but it's older than the Incas. They're related. And he says the mountains, everyone gets their strength from the mountains. Because he asked people, what's your favorite mountain? And that's the one that you get your strength from.
Well, for me, it's this one.
Yeah, that's mine too.
That's why I moved here. Okay, let's move on. The place we left off last week, you were starting to talk about sustainability. And what does that really mean? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the way it's being used, sometimes inappropriately, in mainstream culture. I'm not going to say media, mainstream media, because the mainstream media really doesn't talk about it much. Or if they do, it's often disparaging. The concept of sustainability is a system that is self-replicating. Meaning without any outside interference, it just keeps going. Animals are born, they grow, they're fed, they eat, they have plenty of food, they have plenty of water, they have shelter and the right environment, and they grow up, and that second generation breeds and has viable offspring for a third generation, and so on and so on and so on into the foreseeable future. I won't say till infinity, but in an ongoing, continuous basis. So the environment is the key to plants and animals being able to replicate. There's a continuous recycling process, right? Things die, they fertilize the soil, it rains, new things grow. Some animals eat those new growing plants, other animals eat those animals. Those animals all die, they fertilize the soil, and so forth. There's clean water coming in with rain and snow, streams, lakes flow out, things live in the water, mosquitoes breed, little critters eat the mosquitoes or the mosquito eggs, and bigger critters eat them, and bigger critters eat them, and so on. And it doesn't require us to come along and give every fish living in the pond a vaccination. That we're not chasing down grizzly bears to vaccinate them as soon as they're born. We're not telling them, oh my gosh, you have an owie, you need surgery. We're not telling them, oh my gosh, you're sick, you have to be on this drug for life. They're just sustainable. No outside interference. They take care of themselves. The environment takes care of itself. The plants take care of themselves. Bees and other pollinators help the plants breed and reproduce. And then we have the herbivores eating the plants, and we have the carnivores eating the herbivores, and everything is in balance. And sometimes the cycle is up and down, up and down. You know, the prairie dogs overbreed, and then the coyotes catch up, and then there's less prairie dogs, and the next generation of coyotes go down, and this goes up and down like this. You know, and the hawks and the eagles are eating the prairie dogs, and your destiny as a prairie dog is to be eaten by somebody.
Unless you live in Utah and you're protected by the EPA because they're endangered.
Well, nice segue.
Ideally, though, it would be after they have reproduced. Then they get eaten. That continues.
My point is, when humans come along and think we're smarter than nature,
right,
bad things usually happen. You know, humans have messed up a lot of things with our arrogance. And especially biology. If we build an engineering structure poorly and it falls down, you might squish a few people, might squish a few butterflies, but it's no great calamity to anybody else, really. It's like everybody knows about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge up in Washington. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge, the famous one called Galloping Gurney, where you see the famous footage where it's doing this standing wave, it's twisting and going up and down. Well, every physics professor shows this, right? When you're teaching waves, and then all of a sudden it goes, and falls into the ocean. Actually, it's Puget Sound. It's a narrow inlet for Puget Sound. Okay. They built a bad bridge, and it fell down. The race goes on, right? The human race survived.
Yeah, I know.
They built another one right
And-
next to it.
Yeah, well, look, yeah, I know. I've driven over the new one many times. I grew up in that neighborhood. So, if we mess up other fields, you know, the planes crash, people die, the bridge falls down, we all laugh at the engineers who got the answer wrong, or who didn't know that they were supposed to take into account natural resonance and the natural harmonics of the structure itself. They just took into account static loads, which is their big mistake. And then, I guess we have to take into account these resonance and harmonic vibrations. Okay, well that makes it different, right? But when we start monkeying with biology, that's when bad things happen. Entire ecosystems get wiped out. We wipe out species. And something like the last 200 years, we've extincted 75% or more of the species that were on the planet.
250 species per day right now.
Wow. So we really mess things up. We mess up the ecosystems.
Like the wolves.
Say again?
The wolves are a good one.
Well, the fires.
You know, we stop taking care of the forests. It's biology and human intervention has gone poorly. So almost everything we're doing with biology, whether it's forestry, farming, in agriculture, medicine, GMOs, cloning, you name it, everything we're doing with respect to biology, we are interfering with sustainable processes. The absurd notion that we need surgery for nutritional illnesses should be criminal. There's a lot of the ones I could talk about, but I'm going to talk about one which is common, which is gallstones. This goes into this whole field of sustainability. Gallstones was my first big book that I published, was The Natural Treatment of Gallstones. And the treatment of choice is surgical amputation of your gallbladder, which is a very crucial digestive organ.
But they don't know what to do.
Anyway, my point is about 99.6% of the reason people get gallstones is nutritional. Eating bad foods in the wrong proportions with not enough key nutrients, not enough exercise, not enough water.
Nitrates.
No, that's got nothing to do with
No?
gallstones. Virtually nothing to do with gallstones. Read my book, and then
Okay.
you'll know. All will be revealed. The treatment of choice in the conventional medical world is we cut it out. Because if we don't, here's my favorite quote, the gallbladder will just keep making more gallstones. The gallbladder has nothing to do with making gallstones. It just stores them temporarily. The liver makes the gallstones, or the bile that forms into gallstones. So you're getting a quick biology lesson here. But if we had evolved, developed, been created, whatever term you like, to need surgery for a simple nutritional imbalance, we wouldn't be here. Heart disease is my number 2 favorite example of that, because 95% of heart disease is nutritional, with a heavy dose of environmental toxins thrown on top. The way we manage heart disease is not sustainable. And this is probably a better example for sustainability and the human race not being here, because heart disease in all its forms accounts for 46% of the deaths in this country right now.
That's almost half of the population of
Right.
mankind.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. when you add up the strokes, which is also the same phenomenon,
Right.
and heart disease in all its forms,
Right.
that is
Cardiovascular disease.
Congestive heart
cardiovascular,
failure.
right? All of those things. It's 46% of the deaths.
Wow.
Here's another important factoid regarding sustainability and heart disease. What was that number 100 years ago, at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century? 118 years.
I don't
even
know,
when
but-
they started tracking that.
Before processed foods? I don't know. 2%?
2%.
It's gone up.
It's gone up from 2% to
42.
46% in 118 years.
Because of processed food and fast food?
A lot of things.
Yeah, more people were farmers then and worked hard. And
That's part of it. The soil was different. It had more minerals in it. And
Right.
we had less environmental toxins, and we did not have pharmaceutical companies trying to get wealthy on making you sick with the bad foods that the other branch of the same company owns.
And all the chemicals,
Yeah.
DDT and all that.
Ad infinitum, right?
Yeah.
Something like 10,000 new chemicals being released into the environment every year, none of which are tested for human health and safety. So,
How could that be?
And why?
how can that be?
I mean,
Why is
how
our-
can they do that? I mean, that's terrible.
And then you have to ask, why is our fertility rate drastically plummeting? 5 or 6 years ago, it was down to 37%.
Well, look at the
Yeah.
bees. Look at the bee population.
All of these are examples of how our culture right now is not sustainable. Yeah, the fertility numbers aren't quite that high. It's about 20% right now for people who are
Yeah,
trying to
this was
conceive who
about-
can't.
6 years ago, it was 37.
No, I think I don't know
Maybe
where you
8
get your
years ago.
numbers.
I read a thing, but that's okay.
Okay, you read
I
it.
might be misremembering too.
It could be. That was one of my specialties when I was in clinical
Oh,
practice.
okay.
So those numbers. I mean, I used to teach doctors how to reverse infertility because I was good at it and helping women reverse infertility. So, and it's mostly environmental. It's
Wow.
mostly
Actually,
toxins.
Yeah.
Wow.
Secondarily,
That's what
it's nutrition.
Sure.
Isn't
Wow.
it stress in there too?
Oh, so yeah, throw in stress. A couple of my classic patients were working 80 to 100 hours a week and couldn't figure out why they couldn't get pregnant. Yeah.
And the biphenyls in the linings of cans.
Oh, yeah. So that's
Just-
environmental toxins.
Yeah.
So that was the number one thing to worry about. There's others too, but I'm not here to
Endocrine,
lecture on
yeah,
all of that.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, I'm sorry.
sustainability is we're within a generation of the human race going into a negative growth curve because of an inability to reproduce.
And then you
Yeah.
have populations that kill the
Right.
firstborn if it's not met.
Right? That is not sustainable.
Right.
'Cause
And they found that out really quick, that they were, had an overpopulation, so there was only going to be 2 children per family, so they all wanted a male child. It's like, well, within a generation or 2, that didn't work out very well.
I can't remember the numbers. I know I've read it.
I have to.
Something like China's up to like 70% male.
And it's like 75% of their population is like senior citizens, and then they have all these men.
And who are they going to have for wives?
It's great if a war breaks
The
out.
Russians.
You got all the males for soldiers.
Don't
Russia,
tempt them.
Yeah.
Kazakhstan.
So this is simply not sustainable. It is a complete denial of realities. It's a complete, which is at the societal level, all of these behaviors, whether it's environmental toxins or the heart disease and deliberately inducing NGs to sell drugs and all of these things. At the cultural level, this is a cultural mental illness.
Wow.
If it was one person walking into a psychiatrist or psychologist, they would be diagnosed as being in denial. A lack of ability to recognize reality. Now multiply that by a population, and it's what I call the humanity organism, which is the human race collectively, where each individual human is a cell in the larger organism. This is a mental illness for the humanity organism.
Wow.
I'm getting a battery message.
Oh. What does it say?
It says your battery is running low.
And you're not plugged in.
Yeah.
That would explain it. So somewhere under there is a power strip.
Underwear?
Right in there, I see the red glow.
I see it.
It must have, when moving things around, it must have got knocked out.
There's nothing plugged into it. There we go.
Okay, it's happy.
Now
It's
it's
happy now.
brighter picture too.
Yeah. That's always the clue on that computer is when the picture starts to dim, it thinks
Well.
it doesn't have power.
Okay.
So, right now, the human race is not living and functioning in a sustainable manner. When our medicine requires surgery and artificial drugs that didn't exist until 50 years ago or less, we're not promoting health, and we're not healing our diseases, be it mental, emotional, or physical, properly in a sustainable manner. And whether Trump pushes a button, or the nut in North Korea pushes a button, or communist China pushes a button, or some Russian madman pushes a button, is irrelevant. Because we're only a generation or so away from not being able to reproduce. And within 30, 40 years of that, there won't be a human race unless we get off our keisters and fix that.
There is actually a man, and it's his field, he's a scientist of some sort, who is warning and has presented at the UN Council for something, that currently, unless something is done to change the trend of things, we are 11 harvests away from no food for the planet-wide. That kind of stuff.
I find that one dubious.
That sounds pretty extreme, but
Well, I'll tell
it was
you why.
pretty convincing, but who knows? I don't.
You've heard of Agenda 21.
Yes, I had.
Okay.
I know a lot
The
about
United Nations is trying to take land from everybody, cram people into cities, and don't attach any positive or negative emotion to this. So this is you can download all the Agenda 21 documents and just read it. Here's what the plan is. Okay. And so the UN is trying to justify the actions to meet the requirements of Agenda 21, one of which is to create the fear of dire extreme emergencies, the answer for which is Agenda 21. Okay? So
Well, it's
be
okay.
careful when a scientist presents anything to
I
Agenda 21.
understand. I just
This-
don't remember it.
Okay, so this is not much different than the tobacco company scientists who swore for 50 years smoking cigarettes was safe. It's
While
ex-
they were designing them to be more and more
Right.
addictive.
And give Coca-Cola to your kids, little
Right.
kids.
And it's no different than the lies being spewed by vaccine manufacturers now. It's no different than the one I saw recently, which was a study by a scientist who says Harvard scientist. So that's supposed to make a difference.
Well, he might have attended and dropped out the senior year too.
Well,
I've seen that.
Harvard is a prestigious university. And if you can put your Harvard stamp on something, it's supposed to carry weight.
And Stanford too.
The study in question was coconut oil is bad, it's dangerous, don't eat it. because it has saturated fats in it, and everybody knows saturated fats are bad. Right? Everybody agree?
No.
It was a truism. We've been told it a long time.
So, lipid or fat nutrition is complicated but straightforward. I know lots of PhD level scientists, physiologists, nutritionists, and doctors of every type, medical doctors, naturopathic doctors, osteopaths, chiropractors, you name it, who don't accurately understand lipid nutrition because they didn't pick up a simple basic book. If anybody is interested, the book I recommend is called Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, by a gentleman who I've met and had conversations with, and I like him a lot. His name is Udo Erasmus. And
Udo.
he is one of UDO,
Okay.
ERASMUS.
And the name of the book one more time, please.
Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. And one of the many variables between what's a good fat and what's a bad fat has to do with chain length. Fat is a long chain, okay? If they're really long and saturated, that's bad. If they're short and saturated, that's good. Coconut oil is full of short, saturated fats. It's extraordinarily healthy. There's a stack as high as my 10-foot ceiling here of all the scientific literature that points how healthy coconut oil is. This table, which is this table visible in either camera? Okay.
Oh, maybe in the other one. There's the table.
You see all the papers stacked up on here? That's all the studies that exist in the world that says coconut oil is bad.
Except for the one
Except for
that
this one
that made the news media
that
feed.
just came out in the news. So, guess who sponsored the study?
I think you slipped.
Huh?
I think you slipped earlier. Was it the canola oil people?
Yeah, did I say that earlier?
You know, you slipped when you were saying coconut. You said canola.
Okay.
So it was a
It,
clue.
the study was paid for by a company that manufactures canola oil, which is a genetically modified rapeseed oil
yes.
that's highly toxic and unhealthy to humans. But Canadian companies invest a huge amount of money about 30, 40 years ago in this modified rapeseed. And canola actually stands for Canadian oil. It's an
I
acronym.
didn't know that.
So, a canola oil company publishes a scientific study that says coconut oil is bad. That's the kind of science you have to be careful of, especially if you hear the words UN in whatever's going on. So, it's just a cautionary tone. So,
I have a first edition of Silent Spring.
oh, neat. Rachel Carson. I quote her in my book. Every chapter has a quote on it.
Oh, nice.
And my environmental toxin chapter is a quote from Rachel Carson. In Silent
Does he
Spring.
have a photographic memory?
Hmm?
Does he have a photographic memory?
Yeah.
Do you know of Helen Caldecott, the Australian doctor?
I do too.
Okay,
Helen
Me too.
Caldecott.
Freaky.
I've heard the name.
She's an
Intelligence
Australian
wise.
environmental activist who's a physician
Oh,
in
okay.
Australia.
Okay.
When you're trying to remember something,
I
She's
don't know
got
that.
remember
some
what side
real
of the
good
page
stuff
it was
out
on
too.
and whether it was like at the top or the bottom.
So,
That's hard to have in a photographic memory.
what we've established here is we are not living in an environment that will support human life. We do not have food that will support human life long term. We do not have water that will support human life long term. And we do not have air that will support human life long term.
Guess what?
Right now, the human race is not sustainable.
We're dying out.
Now, sustainability.
Melody's with us.
Huh?
Well, just
Melody's with us.
Oh, yay. Hi, Melody.
Hi, Melody.
Welcome.
Hey, Melody.
Not sure when you tuned in, but welcome. So,
Well, to sustain is to support, to.
okay. Yeah, that's all true. And the way it's being used, well, there's the way it's being used and the way it should be used. What I've described tonight is the way it should be used, which is that concept of self-replication in a continuous repeating pattern. The way it's being misused in mainstream media that covers it, in certain political sectors that cover it, nobody in the political spectrum is promoting policies that are actually sustainable.
True.
The pro-environmental movement doesn't. The anti-environmental movement parties don't. One wants to blatantly destroy the environment. The other picks and chooses short-term causes for political expediency. And nobody's looking at the long term. I don't know a single politician that's really looking at the long term.
I think the only people
not-
that are the scientists that are looking at that is the ones that are watching the bees, BEE, because they're saying they're the closest relative to humans. So what happens to the bees is happening to us as humans.
But even the bee people, they're talking about environmental toxins. They're still not looking at a big enough picture. At least when I sit and look at it, not just from this physical world, three-dimensional, but when I look at it from the higher planes, it's like, we the human race are at a transition point. And we can move up or we can crash and burn. And
Kind of how I see it.
we've been here before. We haven't even fully recovered to the point we were before the last crash and burn. And we're already getting ready to crash or burn or not again. And so the conversation needs to change. We actually have a better model in place. Well, it's not in place. We have a better model on paper. Just like most everything that I talk about on the What We Know page, whether it's technology or science or history or engineering or medicine, we have a better model. It's just not being used, or it's being actively suppressed. And in terms of holistic, sustainable world, in all aspects, it's the traditional, ancient Toltec philosophy called Tolteca Yoto, which is, you've heard me talk about before. It's the pyramid of food and farming, the education, the health and education, and then the social order and structure, which should be the littlest piece of this. And all of it interwoven at every level of this concept is an acknowledgement that the purpose of humanity is spiritual. We have this model. It is crucial. This is where we were talking a lot last week about the children. The time to train the children in this model is the instant they're born, if not before. When women are pregnant, their families, not just the mothers, but the fathers, the brothers, the sisters, the aunts and uncles and nieces and the nephews, the great-grandparents should all be talking to this child who's not yet born. And then as soon as they're born, keep talking to them. Keep them connected with spirit. Keep them connected with their true will of why they came. What piece are they bringing to the table to help serve the purpose of the human race? We all have our own individual true will. what I have contended at times is that the only way to truly fail in life is to not be trying to find it and do it. Now then, go back to the humanity organism I mentioned a minute ago. The humanity organism, the human race as a whole, has a true will.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll only get there by unifying our collective consciousness, working together, and moving the human race forward. And this too is part of Toltec philosophy from days gone by. There is a continuous cycle of birth, life, death, rejuvenation. Birth, life, death, rejuvenation. It happens for ecosystems, it happens for every living organism, including human beings' physical bodies, our physical biological machines, and our spirit, our soul. I like the essence term better. And this is a crucial piece of the reality of the universe that Western culture does not teach at all. Not en masse. Little pocket here, little pocket there. Eastern cultures teach the concept of reincarnation. I understand that if you know reincarnation, you want to break that cycle. It takes all your focus on this lifetime right here. This was the lesson of the movie Groundhog Day. If you happen to believe, if you're watching this and you don't believe in reincarnation, that's okay. We'll find out, one way or the other, soon. Where soon is relative. Probably in less than 1,000 years, you'll find out. But if you are in the one lifetime only camp, then you darn well better be putting everything into this lifetime, because you don't get another. If you're in the reincarnation camp and you want to break that over and over cycle, it's documented so well in the Groundhog Day movie, then you better, darn well better, put all your effort into this lifetime right now.
That or break the wheel entirely.
Well,
Just
yeah,
jump
but
off.
either way, to do that, you have to put all your effort
Yes.
into this lifetime right now. So the answer is, put all your effort into this lifetime right now. We, fortunately, have more advanced shamans than me running around, one of whom is named E.J. Gold. And E.J. Gold did a modern shamanic reinterpretation of the spaces and places in the macro dimensions that are described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. One of many. There's books of the dead from most cultures. It was passed on somehow. Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Celtic Book of the Dead, the yada 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 Book of the Dead. And it's a description. These are descriptions of several things. They're a description of the spaces we go through when we die. They're a description of how to prepare for death. They're a description of how to choose a new lifetime, if you're choosing a new lifetime, rather than to step off that karmic cycle wheel. And they're instructions how to die, and they're instructions on how to live, if we only pay attention to them. So E.J. Gold's reinterpretation is called the American Book of the Dead. He didn't just translate the Tibetan Book of the Dead. He went and shamanically voyaged to all those spaces and looked around at what he saw, and he came back and he wrote it. And we have it. And so at this point, I'm going to ask Bonnie, who is a certified labyrinth reader for the American Book of the Dead, to talk a little about the ABD, as we lovingly call it, and how to incorporate that as part of a practice, and whatever else she feels compelled to say about it.
Okay. Well, we've talked a little bit about this recently. I went over some of this stuff with Yvonne. But this is the standard American Book of the Dead that you'll see with the red cover. It's kind of the classical one. And this has the most of EJ's presence in it, as far as, you know, he makes it humorous, he puts it into language that we can better understand. This is also a version of the Book of the Dead that he wrote, called The Angel's Healing Journey. And I read from this one for many, many years and love it.
Should we pass them around?
No, because I'm going to be referencing some stuff, but afterwards I will. One thing I want to say about The Angel's Healing Journey is that it's very repetitive in its format. So you'll hear the same exact languaging over and over and over again, which is what kind of helps ingrain this into our memory. Because ultimately, these are guides for our journey here in this reality and instructions for our transition. And so in that way, the more you hear these passages, the more you'll remember the instructions. And there's a saying that EJ uses, which is, not making any sudden moves, my habits will carry me through. Now, if we have bad habits, to freak out and show fear whenever we get into a strange situation or whatever our MO is, we can see the ramifications of that. But if we have developed good habits, it's kind of like a martial artist who has done the routine so many times that they don't have to think about it. Their body is going to move in reaction to whatever stimulus comes. Mm-hmm. So when we find ourselves in these chaotic situations, then we want to have a body of habits that's going to kick in to put us in our place of power, basically. And so, like even some of the fear that we've all been feeling over the last few weeks and months as these fires rage and stuff around us and all, it's easy to get sucked into that because that's our natural mode of operation. So we're learning to develop a new body of habits. So in particular, there's a couple one of the things that I was asked to talk about is the Bardo stations. And these are some of the things that EJ has identified, some of the places where you're more likely than other places to experience an entrance to the Bardo, an exit from it, some of the guides that may be there to help you on your way. If we were all to agree to the fact that we came here for a purpose and we're here, there's this background field to the universe, the matrix, the labyrinth, the Bardo, whatever you want to call it. We can talk about that a lot, on a philosophical basis. But I guess what I'm here to tell you, and what EJ has spent his whole life trying to put into writing for us, or into different games or programs to allow us to absorb all this information, is that all of this is right here, right now, happening all the time. And that when we learn the symbols and the colors and the different associations and the places, and as we become more sensitive to the subtleness of these things, that we'll be able to better identify where we're at. And whether we're in a position where we can change our environment, whether we should change our environment, whether we should just be aware of what's going on, but it'll help trigger, hopefully, in our subconscious awareness, that ability to wake up and say, where am I right now? And, I think some of the exercises we've done in the past is just, am I awake? That should be the first thing that comes to our mind is, am I awake or not? In the section called Notes on the Labyrinth, so long as we seem to be somewhere, we can be sure that we are voyagers and that we are in the labyrinth, whether we perceive ourselves as possessing a biological machine or not. So one of the lines that you'll hear a lot through the ABD is, so long as I seem to be having experiences, I'm still in the labyrinth. So I haven't transitioned out. I haven't moved on to the next dimension yet, because as long as I see things going on, I'm still here. So it's kind of like being in a room where there's light coming through a prism in the window, and there's all of these different colors going on, and you're in the middle of that. You're perceiving it. You're going, ooh, pretty, and none of it's real, right? You can't touch it. You can't can't hold it. It's a phenomenon. It's an illusion, and so we are living in an illusion. And we can talk about that all we want, but when we start stalking ourselves and our experiences and journaling that, we'll see that it is in fact really happening all around us all the time. That we're really seeing an illusion, and when we can learn to see through that we can actually see this background field of the universe. We can see this matrix. We can see the structure. Or not. Like Coyote likes to say, things get really interesting when you walk into a room and there's no floor. Mm-hmm. So our mind fills in the things that we feel need to be there, but only to the point that it makes sense in our logical mind that we have a couch and a chair and we can sit down and there's a floor so we can walk in. But essentially, all of that's an illusion. And so another thing I wanted to share was there's a section called How to Use This Book. Just as a midwife assists birth, the reader of the American Book of the Dead assists voyagers who have passed into the macro dimensions to attain liberation or to achieve a conscious and deliberate rebirth on re-entering into the human dimension, in which the voyager may select a living creature with which to associate. Such symbiotic association is commonly called, for the organic view, a lifetime. So EJ's work in particular kind of juxtaposes our idea of what I is and what we're associating with. And in this particular case, he uses the word human biological machine a lot to talk about this body that we identify with as I, and which will die and pass away. And so as we go through this training, we start to identify with that eternal I, that eternal self, the thing that will potentially retain a certain level of consciousness. So the instructions are delivered to the voyager through readings. The lighting, atmosphere, augmented by incense and music, often supplying the mood, acting as a sort of emotional carrier wave, modulated by the thought patterns and imposed images suggested by the text. So, I've taken the Labyrinth reading course several times, and I can offer that to you if and when you're ready for it. But it's a 3-month-long course, and we have to at least agree online to get together weekly to be able to do it. And the exercises are much more effective when you're working one-on-one with others, like the context exercise that we did at the first shamanic weekend. When you're actually seeing somebody's face shape shift right in front of your eyes, then it's no longer theoretical information.
Let me just interject something right there on that. When you see it and you experience it yourself. For me, this is going way back. One of those little aha moments like that was when I started seeing energy fields and auras and the meridians on clients and people I was working on with. And when that happens and you meet someone, all of a sudden there's some kind of resonance, and I started seeing auras, and it's like, oh, well, that's different. Never mind. And it becomes very obvious. So, yeah, go ahead.
So, I think one of the greatest skills that I've got out of doing the Labyrinth reading training is that ability to connect long distance. Because if you can connect with somebody who's passed on and be able to, read for them, then you can do a healing circle long distance, or you can send a transmission long distance, or but it'll give the skills on how to actually deliver the message and hold our concentration and attention so that all of our effort is in the delivering of that message. And in fact, like they say, one of the things that you should do is deliver it as if that person's life depended on it, or that this person was going to be reading for you and your life would depend on it, based off of how you delivered the information, just to give a sense of importance and accuracy to the work. One of the things it says about sensations that indicate that you have a good contact with whatever you're trying to contact is a tingling at the back of the neck, a slight feeling of imbalance as if the room is tilted, a sensation of disorientation as if one really didn't have a bunch of vertigo going on. Hearing and visual perceptions greatly heightened. Sometimes there is an uncanny quiet during the readings, as if something outside had suddenly come to a complete halt while the Labyrinth instructions are delivered. Some readers have reported that they got a funny feeling in the gut or in the top of their head. It felt like it opened up and they could hear things miles away. So these are just some suggestions as what you might possibly feel, but obviously it's a very independent experience, both for you and whoever's receiving it. The other thing that I really got out of this is the idea that you're not so much reading to, first of all, you're not reading to the human biological machine, the thing that died. You're reading to their eternal essence. But more than that, you're delivering a message to a space. So if we were all gone and I write a note and leave it for Golden Eagle here, and he comes through this room 3 hours later and reads it, he's going to receive that message. So where we want to be in the best place that we can, in meditative wise, in our connection when we deliver the messages, it's going to a chamber or a space that the loved one or the one who's passed is going to pass through at some point on their journey through the macro dimensions. And when they get to that space, they will receive your message, depending on how well you delivered it. So I thought that was a different kind of like little nuance to it. So then there's this idea, the fact that this is going on around us all the time, and
What's going on?
that we're in the macro dimension, and it is potential that you can get stuck in and so there's different dimensions to this. And when you read this, some of the lower levels are called the brute dimension, or the hell dimension. And so when you think about when they describe in here what the brute dimension is like, it's like pretty much like it is out there, where people are uncaring and unfeeling and just brutish. So it's not the utopia that we would all like to conjure up and make happen. And so there's different levels, and so depending on what you're finding, if you're finding people that are very brutish around you, it gives you kind of a clue as to where you're at. Really quick, I'm going to flip back to this book because, like I said in here, the format is very predictable. And so one of the things that you hear about is colors in particular. So there was a brilliant, where is it? Let me just read this. So this is a chamber. This is the second chamber of the first hall of the kingdom of heaven. And the important part of the instructions are bolded, but you can read the whole thing. Now, kind of imagine yourself either that you've just passed away, or that you've been in a coma, or that you have been addicted to drugs. All of those things can put you in the same place. Involved with thoughts of my identity, swirling in a hurricane of force, separating into primal elements, phenomena of dimension, opening before me paths of time and space, nothing there but misery and pain. Serene and calm, I wait in stillness and in silence, bathed in cleansing radiation. Brilliant in the light of inner vision, I see myself controlling destiny, clinging to the content of the mind, frozen memory. Penetrating radiation, blue explosion from your heart to mine. Another light, soft, white, near the first, seems to offer refuge to my soul. Melting in vibrating fusion, dissolving my resistance, I lose the force of my reactions, not attracted to the soft white light, wandering alone, maintaining thoughts of ego, bathed in cleansing radiation, surrendering myself in endless crystal waters. All phenomena is illusion, neither attracted nor repelled, not making any sudden moves. My habits will carry me through. So in this particular room, there was a brilliant explosion of blue light, which is the cleansing radiation, which is going to burn away karma and any of the dross or negative energies that we carry. At the same time, there's like this soft white light, and it seems to be a refuge. It seems to be a safer, softer, less harsh place. Think of the difference between the noonday sun and maybe being in a shady spot where you're just being sparkled with shady light. So from the Book of the Dead's perspective, what it's telling you is that if you give in to fear and you're going to run and hide in the softer light to get away from that harsh light, that you're actually throwing yourself into another karmic rebirth. And so in that way, we want to expose ourselves as long as we can to the higher radiations, which is what we're doing when we put ourselves through some of these shamanic exercises that we do. Even, physically, when we go up on the mountain, we're pushing ourselves. But mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, we're also doing the same thing. So by pushing ourselves, and exposing ourselves to these radiations, and keep going, and even doing the vitriol, where you're purposely pushing that button to bring on more radiations, the better chance we have when we get to that point of death where we're going to be going through those things, and we don't want to freak out and just take a lower rebirth. But at the same time, all of those same symbols are accurate here right now. So if you were to, I don't know, walk into a bar, and all of a sudden you realize that it's just got a really strange energy, and maybe there's like a blue strobe light going off, which could be really distracting and really difficult to be in that space. It might give you a clue as to which space you're in and what you might need to do in order to either rebalance or to get the message you need to from that space, or to look for a particular guide that's there that can help you. And so those are some of the things that we get when we read this as those little symbols.
So it's a labyrinth, tree of life. Sort of a labyrinth, tree of life.
Well, it definitely, in EJ's school, they definitely call it the labyrinth. And it's the Labyrinth Reader's course that you go through in order to learn how to do the ABD readings.
The labyrinth in, what is it, Crete?
Yeah, Minoan Crete.
Minoan Crete was a physical representation of this. They built it to mimic this, the macro dimensions. So the name labyrinth comes from Minoan Crete. It was the maze, the underground maze of rooms and chambers that was initiatory. So that space gave us the term labyrinth, that one location. And now we use it for any maze, anything like that, and EJ uses it for this very reason.
And there are those who define labyrinth in terms of being unicursal, meaning there's one path in and one path out.
Right.
And anything that isn't unicursal is then a maze.
Mazes
So
generally
it's
have
a
dead
specific
ends that you
kind.
can get, and the
Right.
little saying is you can get lost in a maze, you find yourself in a labyrinth.
Right.
You know.
Because a labyrinth doesn't have dead ends and things like that.
But you can get discouraged, and one of the lessons of life from walking a labyrinth is that sometimes you see so far away from your goal, and just another turn will take you there.
There it is.
And so we don't want to give up. Now,
Just keep in mind, though, that ultimately the goal of life is death.
Yes.
So this is getting you ready for that.
Consciously.
Right.
So I just wanted to finish with the rebirth stations. Now, think about, some of the strange places you've been, where, obviously there's going to be those places where there's the homeless and the addicts and so forth. And we probably all know that at the same time they could be some of the best channels because they're empty vessels. And so things come through the homeless, and if you're listening to them, and if it's a real Bardo experience, they may be a guide, and they may be an unwilling or even an unconscious guide, but something's coming through them and working through them. And so these are some of the places that EJ lists. He says the following list of rebirth stations is only partial. There's a detailed list found in Practitioner's Guide. I think this was the Practitioner's Guide. Anyway,
Is
so
that your big 3-ring binder?
maybe. So barracks, rare bookshops, a mountain cabin, or a car crash incident. So he's got some descriptions that go with these too. So like there a party, rows of cars parked below a house, hearing a car crash, seeing toy cars from above. And some of these things will also come up in the dreaming. And this is, I would say, probably the single most important thing that I use the ABD instruction for is identifying things in the dreaming. Because the dreaming is the bardo. And we're just learning to navigate it. So that's a whole nother level. The dreaming is something that you'll get instruction on soon, hopefully. But at the same time, these things that I'm going to mention will probably resonate more when you think about your dreams. A morgue, obviously. A concrete underground parking garage. I mean, Arlen has parking garage dreams. Not so much lately, but it's one of his repeating scenarios. Yeah.
Underground, and then there's all these.
Yeah. Right. So a long strand of beach after an eco disaster, islands with tidal waves, men and women on boats, underwater cities. There's just a ton of, okay, so here's some of the normal ones that I think of are like Grand Central Station. So train stations, bus stations. Airports in particular. And then just some odd things like a parquet floor room, or, you know, the checkerboard pattern tiles, a dollhouse, you know, a fun house. So what do we mean by rebirth station? So these are going to be places, they're like portholes, essentially, where you have, if you can identify them, there is a potential for going somewhere else. So in some way, a bus station or a train station is a very logical porthole. You're going to go there. I always think like on an airplane, it's almost like going into a time machine. You know, you walk through these corridors, you lock yourself in this little space, you know, you sit there for a while, and then the doors open and you're someplace else, you know. But there's that sense with these kind of places where you're going to go through something and get somewhere else. Now that can be a rebirth because it was you're going down in level, or you could potentially be going to a different level in the macro dimensions. So did you have anything else that you wanted me to speak on?
No,
or
that's
did
good.
I
You
cover most of what
you
you wanted to?
wonderful job of
So-
presenting things.
So when
that,
would you teach it? Sorry.
let's talk about that later.
Okay.
There's a reason this has been brought up during sustainability. I alluded to it. We don't teach this part of reality in Western culture. So like European, North American, the Western culture, this isn't really taught. And I think it's important to realize we need a sustainable world if we want our children to live someplace, and their children, and their children. But some of those children are going to be us.
Well said.
This isn't just for somebody else we need to take care of this planet. This is for us. What kind of world do you want to come back to? That's the point. That's why we need to be studying the ABD, all of us. That's why it needs to become part of public conversation. The whole concept of sustainability out there, and most of the people talking about it don't have it, it's not being talked about right. It's not being talked about completely. Bits and pieces here and there. But the whole picture is not being talked about. And the return of our essence. And I'm specifically, our spirit, I guess we could say. Not our soul. A soul is something we make during a lifetime. We come in. Think of your soul as like a blank canvas. So yeah, you're born with a soul, but it's like, yeah, there's not a whole lot there. The course of your lifetime, you're painting a picture on that. So you're building your soul during the course of life. But the eternal spirit, what you get from this lifetime, that you get to take with us. It's always said, oh, you can't take it with you, right?
Isn't that a map of your soul?
No, that's a map of the environment.
A map of your soul.
What is it?
It's a
But
map.
it's where you are on it. So
No, it's the environment. Yeah, it's a map, and the map shows you where you are, but your essence is not the Bardos. Your essence is the Voyager, going through the
The
environment.
map is not the territory, it's only a guide that
Right.
the Voyager uses to
Right,
navigate.
it's a guide, but even the territory is not the Voyager.
Right.
The map is not the territory, and the Voyager is not the map. The Voyager is not the territory.
so you get to choose what territory you want to voyage.
Yeah,
And probably the big take-home message for me this week is that the territory can change without any warning. You know, and I think on a physical reality, we've all seen that, how quickly
Right.
things can change. I don't think anybody
Oh,
was
yeah.
expecting how things could get out of hand so quickly. But, on one hand, as human beings, we want to have a certain sense of security. And we want to get everything in our materialistic world perfect. We want to have the right house, the right car, the right job, the right husband, the right whatever. And then keep it that way. And nothing in the universe stays the same or stagnant. It's always moving. And it's a dance that we need to learn how to dance. And you realize that if you're in the middle of dancing, you can't just stop and hold that. Right? And so things will come at us, and we have a better chance of dancing with it than we have of just stopping it.
Okay.
So Shiva, the statues of Shiva in the ring with all the arms.
Oh, right.
The dancing Shiva. Shiva is three things. He's the creator, the sustainer, and the destroyer. Sustainability.
I thought Kali was destroyed.
Kali is a separate entity, face that is nothing but destroyer. But Shiva represents all three
Okay.
in one.
Thank
It's
you.
my understanding.
So,
For what it's worth.
sustainability means self-replication without interference. That part isn't being talked about. I don't remember the last time I heard anybody else talk about that. It's not really where that's the conversation we're going to continue to have over time. I'm pushing that agenda because I'm good at getting in the world's face and reminding them with a firm grasp of the obvious.
That's what a shaman's supposed to do.
Because some-
Self-replication without
I'm sorry?
Self-replication without
Interference.
interference. I can never get that fat last word out.
The sometimes it really does take a rocket scientist. Is my conclusion. Shouldn't, but apparently it does. So, yeah. Question.
So I have a question about your definition on the sustainability, because it sounds like you have a model. Okay, so you have 2 parents and they have 4 kids. That's the model. So they all grow up. They have, 4 kids, and they have 4 kids, and pretty soon we have too many kids, and there's no predators to come and eat those children like there is in the natural world. So it seems like, the sustainability model is not a steady growth, which is what the world is doing out there. They look at a sustainable model as being a steady growth income or whatever it might be, when in fact, if there's too many prairie dogs, we need to shoot them. And at some point, and this is from somebody who's had too many prairie dogs in their.
Shoot just the right number of them.
I think the term you're looking for is equilibrium.
Okay.
Yeah, which is balance.
There's a balance. There's an equilibrium that nature is supposed to have, and if we didn't, in our ignorance and arrogance, mess with it, there would be. So we got really efficient. You know what the problem is? I'm holding it up in front of your face.
Thumbs?
Opposable thumbs. Opposable thumbs made it easy to become tool makers.
So he plays it.
And that act, that process, modified the nervous system. The nervous system modifications enabled us to, these biological machines, it enabled them to host the essence of us. And when we lose connection with our essence, that's when we get the arrogance. We stop looking at the spiritual perspective, and we stop looking at the eternal perspective. And when you do both, when you include the spiritual as the core of your philosophy of life in all aspects of life, and you look at eternity for yourself and for humanity, you go, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't have 18 children who are all going to then want to have 18 children. Maybe I should have 2.
But that should be by self-introspection, not because the government tells you such.
Right.
Some dudes
But
and
when-
students don't get to tell me.
But the
so.
government gets stuck doing.
But the government is us theoretically. Sorry,
That's not where I'm going though.
I understand.
The governments that are forcing that, let's say China, they do not, as a government, have a spiritual connection.
That's right.
Right.
The governments, it's not even so much the governments, but there are cultures that promote lots of kids.
Well, it was important at one time.
Yeah. But the cultures that promote lots of kids are primarily not living in a holistic model. Maybe they have a spiritual connection on one thing, but they don't have it for everything. And that's why the Toltec philosophy has it in everything. And it's that Toltec model of spirituality integrated with everything, and looking at all aspects of society from the day we're born on. And with this ABD material I'm talking about, it's not just this lifetime. I don't want to mess up the land and the sea and the air and the water, because I could be coming back here.
Yeah.
My kids
Like
might
like the Native Americans, when they pick fruit off a tree for the next 7 generations,
Yeah.
they're thinking about.
Yeah.
And I think as far as bringing that idea of spirituality, I mean, you've seen highly religious people, highly religious societies, and everything, it seems like it should be set in the spirit, but it's more dogmatic. So the idea that everything is an invocation, that you are, in whether you're doing the dishes, whether you're cleaning the house, whatever it is, to make that an invocation, is I think one of the ways of starting to bring that into our lives.
Any other questions?
Sarah has to say one just because she hasn't said anything all night. Did you? Oh,
Maybe a
okay.
couple comments.
All right, sorry.
Stay awake right now.
Okay.
All right, let's end it there. There will not be a discussion next week
Okay.
because it's the holiday weekend and there's associated craziness. So we'll take a break next week. I learned long ago, don't fight the holiday weekends no matter how ridiculous they are. I used to say, well, I'm going to be open and serve people on the holidays, like Home Depot or something. And 75% to 90% cancellation or no-show rates with clients coming in. And even the ones who were trying to do that couldn't get there because of traffic. And not that we had traffic jams here, but it's just, I try to call all these other businesses and do my work, and I would try to call labs, I try to call pharmacies, I try to call other suppliers, and nobody's open because it's the holiday. And finally it's like, what am I doing here? That was it. I never didn't do it anymore. So
Are we done streaming? Or?
we're done streaming.
I
We
thought
can
you
go
said
away.